Gundam. Billions of dollars, dozens of animes, millions of dedicated fans, real life size statues of super robots, and they were all started from one anime. 1979's Mobile Suit Gundam was written by Yoshiyuki Tomino, and it was not the first mecha anime ever, despite how old it is. 1979 is closer to World War II than it is to us right now. But what it did do is blow up so much that it basically can be credited with the explosion of mecha anime to this very day. Remember Darling in the Franxx? 02? Darling? All Tomino, baby. I guess a better example would be Evangelion, huh? Oh well, too late now. But that's us right now, the modern age. Let's go back to the 70s and try to understand what could have possibly made people fall in love with this series so much. What is it about giant robots fighting in a war that captivated audiences everywhere? Why does the world love Mobile Suit Gundam? By the way, this video will only have spoilers for the original Mobile Suit Gundam TV show and no other Gundam shows, because honestly, it's the only one I've watched. Also, I'll be discussing the original anime and not the remade movies. While they definitely have their charm and purpose, I want to experience the anime like the original fans would have. So please be kind and try not to spoil anything for me or the other people in the comments. Thank you so much. Without further ado, Mobile Suit Gundam. What's up guys, Darnell here. You might remember me from such hits as this video, the one you're watching right now. Today we're talking about the original Mobile Suit Gundam series, and I have a little bit of a confession to make. When I first started watching Gundam, I had this idea that I kind of wasn't gonna like it, because from what I know about Gundam, you know, it's about giant robots going to battle with each other and fighting each other and war. And that's kind of what I expected from this TV show. I'm not like the biggest fan of war and anime and manga. You know, when I'm reading Kingdom or something and there's a page just full of tactics and what's gonna go down and who has to go where and A attacks C, and I just skip it. I just go to the next page. I read through it. I'm like, do I get this? Do I like it? No? All right, next page. Who's fighting who? And that's sort of what I expected Gundam to be, because the crux of Gundam is war. Every Gundam series, from what I understand, is about like war or battles. But that's not really what this show is about. Mobile Suit Gundam is about war, but it's not about war in the like kingdom sense. It's more of like a battle shonen. The difference between the battle shonen and the war is, in war, people actually die. In battle shonens, you know, guy fights another guy. Oh no, now I'm sent to the Shadow Realm or something. You know, this isn't Choice from Katekyo Hitman. Man, that was a reference. Any Katekyo Hitman fans in the audience? Leave a comment below if you're a Hitman head. No, that just sounds like you're into the video game. But anyways, Gundam is more like war in the fact that tons of people die, it's very emotional, and it's very draining. But the reason I say it's more of like a battle shonen is because the actual war aspect of Gundam is secondary to everything else. And that's kind of the reason that I actually really like this show, despite the fact that I came into it with sort of a negative attitude. That's enough about that. Let's actually talk about the show itself. But to understand what actually makes this show so compelling, we have to look at the show's main character, Amuro Ray. Amuro is a 15-year-old child. That is, I'd say, the most important part of his character. That is the part that comes up the most. And not like people being like, hey, you're 15 years old. Oh my god, look at this 15-year-old kid. No, what I mean is that Amuro is very much a child, and he acts like a child. I know now a lot of animes show kids as basically small adults, like Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, but this anime was made in 1979. Amuro really does act like a child. He's dumb, he's naive, he's inexperienced with things like love, he doesn't understand his emotions and how to cope with things. These are all problems that he struggles with. And it's through him that we see the lens of this war that's going on. Small plot summary about Gundam. Basically, humanity has gone to space. We've sent a whole bunch of people out there to create their own little civilizations, but they all pay taxes right back to the Earth Federation. That is who we are sided with. They are the good guys. Each of these colonies, they're called sides. It goes from like side 1, side 2, side 3, side 4, etc., etc. Amuro lives on side 7. The bad evil guys of this series, Zeon, are another side. I don't remember what side they are. They don't really say it in this show at least. But Zeon has basically decided like, hey, this is basically like feudal times. Like, we're basically a colony paying taxes to the king, because the Earth Federation people are actually treated a lot better than the people in the colonies. It's like a whole thing in the show. You can watch like Gundam Thunderbolt if you want to see stuff like that. But yeah, they're like, hey, all these people who are born and live on Earth are treated way better than us, and we have to pay taxes to the Earth so that they can all live better lives. What's up with that? And so they decide to go independent. Everybody's cool with that. They're like, yeah, sure, go ahead, be independent. That's fine. So they go independent, and then they realize they're like, hey, actually, you know what? Not only do we deserve our independence, we're actually better than everybody else. We should take everybody else over. And that's the plot of Gundam. Basically, Zeon, this rogue colony, has gone and is trying to take over everybody else, and Earth is fighting back against them. And Amuro and the rest of the crew are all part of the Earth's Federation. And to be clear, none of the characters that we see and that are in the crew on the side of the Earth are actually soldiers. It's only like the last 10 episodes of the show they actually become like inundated as like legitimate soldiers. No, this show has a bunch of civilians take up the roles of soldiers because of what I'm about to tell you about. Amuro is a normal child who lives by himself for some reason. Both of his parents are alive. They're just kind of off doing their own things for some reason. So Amuro lives alone. He's this sort of like engineering whiz kid. We see him build this robot called Haro. And Haro is actually a very interesting character. So basically, Amuro has built this robot, and throughout the series, we don't really get to see a lot of Haro, but what we do see is that Haro is designed to basically be a parent to Amuro. It tells him when to sleep, when to eat, when he's depressed, etc., etc. Amuro, 食事よ! Amuro, 食事よ! Amuro, Amuro! Amuro, 元気ないな! Amuro! そうかい? 何なの? な、ハロー。大丈夫だろ、僕。Amuro, because, yeah, Amuro doesn't have any parents to look out for him. He often gets preoccupied with his engineering, and so Haro is there to be like, hey, Amuro, you haven't slept in 72 hours. Maybe go to sleep. Maybe eat something, Amuro. And I just find that really interesting that Amuro has basically built himself a parent because he really has nobody there for him, except for characters like Fra Bo. Fra Bo is Amuro's childhood friend, the classic like childhood friend trope. She lives like close by to Amuro, not next door like every other TV show. Next door to Amuro is actually Hayato, another main character. But Fra Bo is basically Amuro's, like, I guess, love interest. She's of a similar age to Amuro. And they're sort of like very close with each other. And it's kind of never really stated, but it seems like they actually do have feelings for each other. But they're both children, so they don't really know how to express that to each other. And so it's a bit awkward watching them interact. But it's actually quite endearing because, like, yeah, I didn't know how to talk to girls and how to process romantic feelings for each other, etc., etc. It's kind of endearing to see children characters act like actual children. We also have Hayato. He's pretty cool. He lives next to Amuro. Yeah, that's basically it. But those are sort of the main characters we hang around that do a lot of the battling stuff. We'll get introduced to the crew later. What happens is Zeon invades Side 7. And during that combat, a lot of the soldiers who are stationed on Side 7 are killed. And because of that, it's up to a bunch of civilians who live there, like Amuro, Fra Bo, Hayato, and all the other survivors, to go to the military base and escape while Side 7 is being destroyed. They then take off in a spaceship and are able to escape Side 7 before it is destroyed. And so now, because a lot of the soldiers are injured or are killed, it's up to these civilians that have escaped to what is known as the White Base to basically pilot it and do all the jobs that all the soldiers were doing before them. Because after Side 7 is destroyed, Zeon doesn't stop. They continue pursuing everybody from Side 7 to eventually wipe them all out. And that's basically what the plot of this show is. It's not about warfare. It's not about, this troop fights that troop and they cross each other out. And it's none of that. It's about a bunch of civilians who escape the destruction of their entire country. And now they're trying to get to the Earth Federation while being tracked by a bunch of Zeon goons. That actually surprised me quite a bit, because it gives less of a war vibe and more of a, survivors getting whatever they can, doing whatever they can to survive while being pursued by these, like, legitimate soldiers. And so you might be wondering to yourself, okay, where does the Gundam come into any of this? While Side 7 was being attacked, they had experimental military technology there. And while running away, Amuro sees the Gundam. He's like, hey, we're all about to die right now. I may as well try and pilot this thing because, he is an engineer and maybe save some people's lives. One of the things I quite enjoy is that Amuro doesn't immediately pick up on how to use everything. The thing that happens is that the Gundam is such new technology that basically none of the bullets from the enemies can get through it. And so Amuro has a bunch of time to learn how to move around and pull out his sword and stuff like that because they're trying to kill him. But it's just not working because the Gundam is basically indestructible to the enemy. So he has enough time to learn how to do all of the basic commands. And then also, he's like an engineering whiz. So it sort of makes sense that he's able to pilot this gigantic mechanical robot. And so that's basically the plot of Gundam. These civilians turn soldiers, running away, while Amuro is in this experimental military technology, piloting it because, yeah, basically nobody else can. And that's Gundam. It's an opening that makes sense with what's established. They give us all the information, and then all of it just works. And so the episodes of Gundam are basically about like, hey, how do we continue to survive by doing things like getting food, getting medical supplies, taking care of all the people who are on board, because, it's a bunch of civilians, so there's lots of old people, there's pregnant women, there are children, while the main cast are a bunch of teenagers and kids trying to do all these things, also while being pursued by a fascist military regime trying to kill all of them. They gotta keep everybody fed. Just like how I'll keep you fed if you subscribe. So with that, let's talk about the crew real quickly. One of the things I also quite enjoy about Gundam is the fact that it's actually pretty diverse. Something that you don't really see in a lot of anime nowadays, unfortunately. A lot of the crew are from differing backgrounds, because despite the fact that they're all living in one big country together in space, it seems like they've taken a bunch of people from a bunch of different cultures and placed them into these sides, which makes some sense. So a lot of the crew is racially diverse. I originally thought it was going to be mostly Japanese people, but it's actually not really. I mean, first of all, we have Amuro. Amuro is actually Canadian. He's just like me, guys. He's just like me. Amuro was born in British Columbia, Canada, which I was actually not expecting. I thought he was going to be a Japanese kid, but no, he's Canadian. We have other characters like Mirai, who is Japanese. We have characters like Ryu Jose, who is a Latino man. We have Sailor Mask, who is actually from the enemy colony of Zeon. We also have Job John, who is just like the most generic white guy ever. His name is Job John, for God's sake. The crew isn't a perfect representation of all cultures and colors, but there's a lot of people there. Unfortunately, there aren't any black people that I can think of on the crew, but black people do exist throughout the world, thankfully. This anime does do a pretty good job with representation. Oh, we do have one very specific brown representation with the villain Lala. She's she's interesting. Let's just say when she's on screen, things get very interesting. Yeah. a lot of weird stuff happens when Lala's on screen. With her introduction, it's basically the introduction of psychic powers into the series, which we don't really need to get into because I'll just say it right now. If you know what a Newtype is, I don't like them. I don't like it. Kind of just comes out of nowhere. No, thank you. Eventually, the crew does get a bunch of like legitimate soldiers who aren't just these random civilians. And a lot of these soldiers are actually named, which I quite enjoy. They aren't just random people. And I'm just like, yeah, it kind of makes the world feel more alive that, these aren't just like NPCs who happen to be there. These are real people with like real names. They might only say them like once or twice, but it's consistent. And I quite enjoy that. The guys who are navigating the ship, Marker and Oscar, those guys are named. Just like random guys throughout the entire ship. It makes the world feel more alive, you know what I mean? And if you're wondering what happens to all the civilians and the children on board, well, they are successfully evacuated, except for 3 children who are orphans, unfortunately. And after that point, all the main characters who are still on board, they still operate the white base, are given 3 options. Number 1, they are executed for the illegal operation of classified military technology, imprisonment for the operation of classified military technology, or continue fighting. And so that's what they do, unfortunately, because they're basically given no other real option. And obviously, they didn't want to do it. I don't think I need to spell it out for you. But basically, nobody in Gundam likes fighting. Nobody likes the war. There's no, like, Solf J. Kimbleys here.
You think this is our job? To cause tragedy?
Well, that's how it seems. But let's see. Tell me, miss, can you honestly tell me, in that split second when you take down an enemy, you don't allow yourself to feel the slightest tinge of satisfaction and pride in your skills? Well, Miss Marksman.
Everybody in Gundam, even the bad guys, they just want to go home to their families and like live normal lives, but are unfortunately thrust into these circumstances. And it's things like that sort of give Gundam its critique of war and, set it apart from regular war stories. So what is the appeal of Gundam then? If I want to see a story about a bunch of people trying to survive, I don't know, play Oregon Trail or something. Like I said before, the appeal of Gundam comes with what Gundam says about war. There are tons of stories about what war is, what it does. It's probably one of the most written about things in human history. Just war and how it affects us as people. If Gundam's saying war bad, there's a lot of media that also says, war bad. I don't need an anime to tell me that war is bad. You know war is bad. I know war is bad. Lockheed Martin people know that war is bad. Like I said before, the battles and war in Gundam is the secondary thing that happens. The main thing that happens is these characters and their interpersonal relationships and how war actually affects them as people. One of my favorite episodes of this show has to deal with the law. And that sounds stupid. That sounds really stupid. But please, let me explain. Let me give you an example of why I like this show so much. So what happens is, the crew of the White Base captures a Zeon soldier. They have a quite literal prisoner of war. And so they then have to decide what to do with him. And through this, they have to look at a bunch of treaties between them and Zeon and decide, like, hey, what are we legally allowed to do with this guy? And what they come to, the conclusion that they come to, is that they're allowed to shine a bright light into his face and ask him hard-hitting questions. And that's it.
南極条約は調べましたよ。小泉少尉、上野鉱山のことを話してくれませんか。そう簡単に喋るわけにはいかんよ。
They can't hurt him. They can't even not give him food. This happens in an episode where they run out of salt, and so while they imprison him, they're like, yeah, we have to give you 3 square meals a day, but guess what? None of those meals are gonna have salt because we don't have salt. So I hope you like bad tasting food. And it's just like, this is what you do with your prisoners of war? God damn, okay. Like, I need you to understand, Gundam is a dystopian future where we're basically fighting space Nazis. And this is the worst thing that they do with their prisoners. And Zeon is like the exact same. Another example. So this episode, they want to evacuate all the civilians that they have on board. They tell the enemies that are pursuing them, like, hey, we have civilians on board. We want to evacuate them. You know, it's in the treaties. Like, please assist us in this. And Zeon is like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Do you actually have civilians on board? Yeah, okay. We'll stop attacking you. We'll work together and get these civilians off your ship. And guess what? Zeon doesn't do anything evil that episode. They legitimately help them get these civilians off of their ship. I was dumbstruck. The bad guys of this episode are the Federation. And I was like, what? What is happening? So what happens is the Zeon crew that is following them and eventually helps them assist with the civilians, the commander had actually lived in the area that they want to drop the civilians off in. And he's like, oh, if they want to be dropped off here, maybe some of my kinsmen are here. Maybe there are some people who actually also lived here. So yeah, of course I'm going to help these people get to their hometown. I also lived here. And so they legitimately help with the evacuation of these civilians. And what the White Base and Amuro do is they use this as cover to, while they're helping them evacuate the civilians, kill all of the members of Zeon. And it was kind of a shocking scene, because one of the final scenes of this episode is Amuro has shot down the commander who had lived there in the past. He is injured and he's being tended to by a mother who wanted to go to the nearby city because that's where her family lives. And so he's being tended to by her, and they help each other go to that city. And while this is happening, while he's assisting this lady and her, young child, Amuro is off in the background just slaughtering members of Zeon. And all they've done this entire episode is just try and help a group of civilians. And what do they get? They get massacred by Amuro. And it's just a stark contrast between this guy who's trying to help this lady and she's helping him, and Amuro just going berserk and slaughtering all of these people. And it's just a fantastic episode. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that these evil Nazis in this future dystopia is probably less evil than modern governments in our world. Just take that in for a second. Zeon genuinely wants to help a group of civilians, and they get tricked and slaughtered because of it. Another episode has a bunch of Zeon soldiers place a bunch of bombs on Amuro's Gundam, and they watch from a safe distance as Amuro is attempting to disarm all of these bombs. Amuro does do that successfully, and they've been watching this whole time as Amuro's been disarming these bombs. And one of the constants throughout Gundam is that nobody knows Amuro's a child. You don't see who's in the cockpit of this gigantic mechanical robot, especially when you're in the middle of combat. So they see Amuro get out and disarm all these bombs as a 15-year-old child. And they're like, what the heck? Why are these guys employing children? And so, they don't have any say over who the Earth Federation puts against them. But after Amuro's done disarming the bombs, they take off their uniforms and put on regular civilian clothing, and they go to Amuro in a car. And they tell him, like, hey, great job, man. They tell him, like, hey, keep fighting the good fight. And the only reason they did that is because they wanted to see this little kid who's piloting this Gundam. They could have just brought guns and killed Amuro right there and then. But no, they genuinely wanted to see and speak with Amuro and be like, hey, who is this kid that we've been fighting all along? And, who had to disarm all of these bombs.
怪我でもしたのかい、パイロットさん。これからも頑張れよ、大将。じゃあな。
いいな。地球に住んでる人って気楽で。
連中だな、仕掛けたの。
そうらしいわね。
Zeon is consistently portrayed as normal people who do normal things, just like the Earth Federation. Oftentimes, when people do eventually see that Amuro is in fact a child, they'll sort of reflect on that for a second, but just continue fighting, because if they don't, they'll die. But they do actually reflect on the fact that they are fighting a child, and it's just really interesting to see. Even a character like Rambaral, who we don't need to get into his thing, he's a character who I quite enjoy. But basically, there is a group of Zeon soldiers who know that Amuro is a member of the Federation. They know that he is an enemy, just a straight-up enemy. But while they're outside of their weapons and not in battleground territory, they treat Amuro to a meal. They, tell him stories about their lives. They talk to him like a normal person. And it's just so interesting, because what Gundam does is it tells you that on both sides, these are just regular civilians. They're all just placed in terrible circumstances. There are no fanatical characters in Mobile Suit Gundam. Everybody is just trying to do their best so that they can survive, regardless of the side that they're on, including the evil royal family of Zeon. So let's talk about the Zabi family. So Zeon is ruled by a family called the Zabis. They are the royal family. So they are the family that has started the war with Zeon and the Earth Federation. They are the most evil Nazis, basically. And even they are given humanity in how they're characterized. So something you have to understand about Gundam is that it is about war and it is incredibly political. So let's talk about the leader of Zeon, Degwin Zabi. Degwin Zabi is not who I thought he was going to be. When I imagine the leader of Zeon, the bad guys who we've been fighting this entire time, who Amuro and the crew have been running away from and slaughtering and battling this entire time, I was not imagining just a normal guy. So something you have to know is that early on, the youngest member of the Zabi family, Garma Zabi, fights Amuro and dies. He loses. And after this happens, the royal family is deciding what to do about his funeral. Degwin Zabi has many children. He has 3, I think. And they're deciding okay, we have to give him a state funeral and it's going to boost the morale of the troops so we can keep fighting. And Degwin's reaction to this is really interesting. He asks his children, he's like, hey, can we please just have a private funeral for my son? Please, I'm begging you. And he's on an iPad just watching videos of his son running through fields and playing with him and all of that stuff as he reminisces about his son. And, I wasn't expecting this. He's supposed to be the evilest man in the universe. And the first time we see him is very humanizing. It's about the loss of his son. And he's pleading with his children, please, I don't want to do this for political reasons. I just lost my beloved son. Please, can we not make this about the war? And they're of course not. What are you talking about, idiot, old man? Of course we're going to have to give him a state funeral. And they do eventually give him a state funeral.
ガルマの死を我が王家だけで悼むのがなぜいけない。
父上、今は戦時下ですぞ。国民の戦意高揚をより確かなものにするためにも、国を挙げての国葬こそ最もふさわしいはず。ガルマの死は一人ガルマ自身のものではない。ジオン公国のものなのです。
私は議連に賛成です。
ガルマを守りきれなかった奴を処分すれば、それで国民への示しがつくわ。
そのようなことはあなたの権限で行えばよろしいこと。大切なことは儀式なのですよ、父上。
ガルマは国民に大変人気があったのです。彼の国葬を行うことによって国民の地球連邦への憎しみをかきたてることこそ。
その前に必ず一つ大戦果を挙げてご覧に入れますよ。親の七光で将校だ元帥だなどと国民に笑われたくはありませんからね。ではお目にかかる日を楽しみにしております。
まだこんなところにいらっしゃったのですか。閣下のお気持ちはお察しいたしますが、皇王としてのお立場ゆえお役目だけは果たしていただく。
分かっておる。
But this is a characterization that stays with Daegwon Zabi. It's that he is, at his core, a family man. And so you might be wondering, how is this possible? How is this evil, evil man just like a normal guy? And it's because he's a normal man that we can understand the nature of evil. I think one of the things that this anime is trying to tell us is that there's a banality to evil, that there is a mundanity in the processes of evil and malice, and that even just like regular people are trying to save their families and live their lives can do evil things. We see this in the story of Daegwon Zabi. Originally, after Zeon declares its independence, it was a republic. It was, for the people. And it was led by a prime minister, not a royal monarchy. After the prime minister dies, and it's implied that Daegwon kills him, he takes over. He then declares war on the Earth's Federation. And he states this in the show very plainly for all of us to understand what his reasoning is. He did this because it's a great way to amass power.
聞こう。知っておるか。アドルフ・ヒトラーを。こうはそのヒトラーの尻尾だな。わしはジオンの国民を急ぎまとめる方便として候補生を敷いた。ジオンの理想を実現するためにな。しかし、
ヒトラーの尻尾の戦いぶりご覧ください。
ヒトラーは敗北したのだぞ。
I need you to let that sink in, okay? The reason that the entire war with Zeon, every single episode of Gundam, all these characters fighting and dying, and all these lives lost, all of these people, it's all because Daegwon Zabi knew that if he declared an enemy, and he was like, hey, these are the bad guys, this is the other, we must stop them. He knew that it would allow him to amass enough power to basically instate him and his family as royalty, which he does. But where his downfall happens is the fact that his children also grow up in the society he designed for war propaganda against the Earth's Federation. So, the society he designed for the prosperity for him and his children is his downfall because it is eventually the war that kills Daegwon Zabi and all of his children. At his core, Daegwon Zabi is a politics man. He is a man who understands the nature of politics. He even compares one of his sons to Adolf Hitler with the way that he speaks, and we know that Daegwon Zabi is a man who is educated. At his core, he's a man of politics, of bureaucracy, and he uses this to his advantage, and just like Adolf Hitler, it eventually kills him and everybody that he loves. The final scene of Daegwon Zabi that we see of him is him carrying a peace treaty to the Earth Federation to finally put an end to this war. And guess what? One of his sons kills him. He doesn't let it happen because he sees this as weakness, as this old man trying to stop the glory of the great Zeon. The great Zeon that Daegwon Zabi created in the minds of every single citizen of Zeon. Daegwon Zabi is eventually what kills himself. This utopia that he was trying to create for him and his children crumbles and is lost to the sands of time. Daegwon Zabi isn't some evil, malevolent, fanatical man who believes himself to be a god and genuinely thinks that Zeon are superior to the Earth Federation. He knows better. He knows that we're all just people. And this is the crux of Mobile Suit Gundam. Everybody is just people. All of the horrific things that can happen during war, all of the things that happen in our lives that we see aren't done by monsters. They're done by regular people. To understand what humanity is, we have to understand what the nature of people is. And that includes evil. Humanity isn't wholly good or wholly evil. It's a mix, yin and yang, all of that. And that's what Gundam is about. So let's talk about another group of people who are normal, but are also, in my eyes, evil. Let's talk about Amuro's parents. So one of the things about Amuro is that during the course of the war, he has to learn different ways of coping with what's happening because, it's not normal for you to just start killing people and have zero feeling about it. So he has to learn different ways of coping. He runs away from White Base at one point. He tries to just become numb to it. He cries. In fact, Amuro cries a lot in this show, which I was actually really surprised by because it's not like a normal showing we get to see for a lot of male characters. And it reminds me that he's he's a child. And he doesn't have the generic tropes of masculinity thrust upon him. He also tries to find comfort in things like love, and we'll put a pin in that. We'll talk about it soon, I promise. But one of the things that Amuro does try is empathy. He's never tried to telling people about how he feels. And when he does do that, he goes to the only people who he thinks will listen to him, his parents. You know, people who are supposed to unconditionally love you. So let's talk about Amuro's mother for a second. Amuro's mom she's just like on Earth in some like refugee camp. They find people, they take care of them, etc., etc. So Amuro goes and visits his mother, and at first she's very excited to see her son. It's sort of implied that Amuro's parents are separated, and when Amuro went to Side 7, he went only with his father, and his mother stayed on Earth. So Amuro hasn't seen his mother since he was a like little kid. So Amuro visits his mom, and she's really excited to see him. She sees her young boy grown up, and at this point, Amuro has run away from White Base. He still has the Gundam, but he's still, you know, in his Federation clothing and all of that. So Earth is a contested territory between the Earth Federation and Zeon. So some territories are occupied by Zeon, some are occupied by the Earth Federation. So this is a Zeon-occupied territory. While there, Amuro's mom and him catch up about, you know, all the things that they're doing. You know, she comforts her son and, you know, feeds him and all of that stuff. But some Zeon soldiers start to approach, and Amuro, still in his Federation outfit, you know, gets a little scared about what's about to happen. And he goes and he kills these guys. And Amuro's mother, we didn't know this until right now, but she is a staunch pacifist, like very, very much a pacifist. And after seeing Amuro kill these guys and pursue them, she sort of goes kind of ballistic. And she's like, you know, who is this? Who are you? That's not what my son would do. That's not the son I know. He would never do something like this.
あの人たちだって子供もあるだろうに。すさんだね。
じゃあ母さんは僕がやられてもいいっていうのかい？戦争なんだよ。
そうだけど人様に鉄砲を向けるなんて。
母さんは愛してないの？
そんな子供を愛さない母親がいるものかい。
嘘つけ。
And she thinks back to the Amuro that she raised as a little kid, you know, a kid who wouldn't even hurt a fly. And she sees the young man in front of her, and she's like, you know, this isn't my son. You're not my kid. My son would never do something like that.
アムロ、私はお前をこんな風に育てた覚えはないよ。昔のお前に戻っておくれ。
今は戦争なんだ。
I raised a pacifist, and she is disgusted, like quite literally disgusted with Amuro.
男手で育てたからかしら。あんな子じゃなかったのに。虫も殺せなかった子が。
And at this point, Amuro, you know, hadn't told her about all of the fighting that he has done. And with this, he realizes that he can't tell his mother because she won't understand. She won't be able to comfort him because even now, just with what just happened, she thinks that he is a disgusting monster. And so how is he going to tell her any of this? And so what ends up happening is, you know, Amuro runs away. He runs back to White Base and he continues on with the story. And the final scene we see of Amuro's mom is her looking at Amuro as he rides away, and she starts crying. And it's not crying because she's lost her son. It's crying because she sees Amuro as a monster. She thinks to herself, you know, where did I go wrong? What happened to him? And it just sucks.
アムロがお世話になっております。
我々こそアムロ君のおかげで命拾いをさせてもらってます。
そんな。
いや、事実です。今日の彼の活躍も目覚ましいものでした。
まあ、そうですか。
これからもお達者で、お母さん。
失礼いたします。お子様をお預かりします。
Hey guys, editing Darnell here. So I just wanted to note that I do feel like I am coming off a bit harsh against Amuro's mother. Because of the circumstances, you know, she hasn't seen her son in years, and she's allowed to be shocked at seeing the man that he's become. You know, he's become a dog of the military, basically. And she's allowed to have those feelings, seeing the young man that she raised become such a vastly different person, especially one that disagrees with her core beliefs. The reason I'm going so hard on her is because, you know, firstly, Amuro is a child, And secondly, at this point in the story, he had been going through so much. I just wanted to see him, get one win, have at least one person on his side. And unfortunately, that doesn't come from his mother in this circumstance. But to be clear, she is allowed to have her feelings. It's just, I wish she would have had a little bit more empathy for her struggling son. So then we get to Amuro's father, who arguably is worse. So when Side 7 is being attacked originally and destroyed, Amuro's father is also there, which by the way implies that Amuro's father is just like one car ride away from him, but just never visits him for some reason. But Amuro's father is the typical, too busy working kind of guy. He's too busy to deal with his child because he's too busy working, providing, that kind of thing. So Amuro eventually finds his father on Side 6, which is a neutral territory between Zeon and the Earth Federation. And when he sees his dad, he's like, "Dad, I've been looking for you. Oh my god." And his dad has one of the most muted reactions I've ever seen in my life, where he's just like, "Oh, Amuro."
父さん
おうアムロか。
父さん
And it's not even an acknowledgement of like, "Oh my god, Amuro, I haven't seen you in so long," or anything like that. It's just like, Amuro, how's the Gundam, the thing I built, how's that going?
ガンダムの戦果はどうだ？順調なのかな？
はい父さん
来るがいい。
It's good, right? I built that thing. It's great, right? And he takes Amuro to his apartment and he's like, "Hey, look at this thing I built for the Gundam. Isn't it sick? Put it in the Gundam and come back and tell me how it is." And Amuro can't have a regular conversation with his father because the only thing that his father wants to talk about is his creation, the Gundam. And it sucks because Amuro's mother and Amuro's father are both neglectful and bad people, but in very different ways. And, ways that I can see normal people being with their children and other people being like, "Oh, it's fine, that's okay. Some parents are just like that." Maybe you even know parents who are like that, and it sucks. There's a lot more to Gundam than a lot of the things I've described so far. One of the things I haven't even mentioned is Kika, Katz, and Let's. There are 3 orphan children aboard the White Base. Kika, Katz, and Let's. They stay with the White Base throughout the entirety of the series, okay? Even after the Federation offers to take the kids in to daycare while the war is going on. They keep the kids, which was very surprising to me. Because I was like, wait a minute, this is kind of perfect. Because these kids, shouldn't experience the horrors of war. And they finally get an out to get these kids away from the horrors of war. And they're like, actually, you know what? Nah, we'll keep them. We'll keep the kids. And the Federation is like, "Yeah, you know what? You guys said you can keep the kids. Take the kids." I was like, "Huh? Excuse me. Excuse me. These kids should not be on the front lines," which is exactly where they go, by the way. They go to the front lines of the war with these children. And I'm like, "What? What are you doing?" Excuse me? This is not okay. Another thing is that there is, unfortunately, or if you maybe like them, fortunately, Newtypes. And man, I don't even know where to start with this. There are a couple of hints throughout Gundam that Amuro is a little bit different than everybody else. His brain works a little bit differently, and not in the normal, he's a genius kind of way, but in the, he might be a psychic kind of way. In the last 10 episodes of Gundam, they introduced the concept of psychics, and then they take that idea and they just crank it up to 11. And you barely even had time to marinate with this idea. And they're just like, "Yeah, you know what? They can see into the future, the time stopping, and they can map out pathways and telepathically speak to each other." And it's just like, whoa, wait a minute, guys, wait a minute, what's the huh? There's even a scene that's I don't even know how to describe it. It seems NSFW, especially because Amuro is a child. But there is a scene that just kind of looks like, I got a hentai. It just looks like porn between these two characters. And it's described as their minds melding together. But it's just so weird and out of nowhere. And just I know that Newtypes are going to become a thing with all the later Gundams. You kind of can just tell that that's where everything's going. It's where the power scaling is going. But man, I just didn't like the integration in this series. It just doesn't do it for me. Another thing I forgot to mention is something I actually really quite enjoyed. The Hello Kitty OVA. There is a Hello Kitty OVA that takes place during this war, during this arc. There are tons of Gundam series throughout Gundam. There's probably more Gundam series than there are episodes of this TV show. But there's a Hello Kitty OVA that takes place only during this TV show. It's 3 episodes, and each episode is 2 minutes long. And it's about Hello Kitty like seeing Amuro in the TV and being like, oh my god, he's going through so much pain and suffering. I should help him. And it's just like, and she comes and she fights Zeon, but she fights them with like her love beam and makes them all love each other. And she has an AT field and it's just ridiculous. And it's just so much fun. And if you've watched Gundam, I recommend just doing what I did and going on Discord and watching it with your friends because it's just so hilarious. But yeah, if you've ever wanted to see Kitty White help Amuro Ray in the middle of the 1 Year War, it's there. It's the only piece of anime that I can find that Hello Kitty has done a crossover with. But speaking of characters who get their own individual episodes, there's a character I haven't mentioned so far, Kai. This is really surprising me, but Kai gets his own 2-part episode, which I wasn't really expecting at all. Kai's a very interesting character because he's the only person on White Base that we're just supposed to hate. When we first meet him on Side 7, he's refusing to help an injured person escape the destruction of the colony and trying to get on by himself. He's just a classic jerk. During the course of the show, he's often cracking jokes or making little snide remarks at Amuro or the other pilots, even at times where it's just inappropriate. Nobody on the team really likes him, and he's pretty much there just to entertain himself. And then we get his solo episode. There's a point at which anybody can basically leave White Base with no problems, and Kai takes this opportunity and runs. And while he's leaving, Amuro speaks to him. Even though he's an asshole and nobody likes him, he's still part of the team and is partly responsible for the fact that everybody else is alive. Even if they don't like each other, they're still brothers of war regardless. And Amuro tells him that. And I really like that a lot. It's part of the growing up that we slowly watch Amuro do. Eventually, Kai leaves and decides to bunk with a woman who Kai learns pretty early on is a spy for Zeon. The only reason she's even letting him stay is to pump him for information that she can sell to Zeon so she can provide for her younger siblings. This is one of the things Gundam excels at, episodes that serve multiple purposes. Not only are we getting a character-focused episode on Kai, but we're also seeing how people on the ground live and survive day to day. And this woman puts food on our table by working with Zeon. So then Kai does something surprising. He helps the woman actively and comes back to White Base with her in tow so that she can get more information. He only gives her enough information so that it won't give an actual tactical advantage to Zeon, but he's still helping her regardless. There's a couple reasons he might be doing this. Maybe he's into her? I don't know, but the idea that I like is that we see that she's dirt poor and often struggles to put food on the table, and that Kai is just doing her a favor out of the kindness of his heart. Even a character who throughout the series we're supposed to hate time and time again gets character development. And if you're wondering what happens to the woman, she ends up sacrificing herself for Kai and dying. We never get to see what happens with her younger siblings because right after this, we're dragged into the siege of Zeon HQ and the final battle of Mobile Suit Gundam. After this, we go from only seeing Kai as a snide, pompous idiot to seeing him also struggle with the war, being hesitant and using crude humor as a way to cope. Just like everybody else, he's human. Gundam has these little cutaways to other characters from time to time, but not to this extent. I genuinely hope for the future of Gundam they do this more, because these little one-off stories like helping the spy or Mirai choosing between two men or Fraubo's struggles to take care of people on board of the White Base are just so good. I love learning these little things about these side characters. A character I know we're going to learn more about is Char Aznable. And if you're a big Gundam fan, you know exactly who this is. If you're not, then let me break it down to you this way. On Crunchyroll, when you watch the original Mobile Suit Gundam, there are 2 seasons. One is the show Mobile Suit Gundam, and the other is something called Char's Counterattack. Now, if you're a big dummy like me, you'll think when people talk about the quote remastered Gundam movies, that's what they're talking about. No, in fact, this is like the 4th thing you have to watch in order after watching Mobile Suit Gundam. Why is it there? Why did I spend so much time watching it without Googling what it is first? And then think to myself, Gundam is really weird. Maybe I shouldn't watch this. And then drop it for like 4 months? We'll never know. But what we do know is that in the original series, Char is a legendary Zeon pilot. When he shows up, it's to show how much of a genius Amuro is to be able to go toe-to-toe with the Red Comet, Char Aznable. And as we go along in the series, despite how much Amuro grows, Char is always one step ahead of him. He's the wall that Amuro has to climb over. Throughout the series, he's kind of just mysterious, and we don't really learn too much about him until the very end. I don't have much to say about him. He's alright. I know we're gonna get a lot more of him, so I'm just kind of waiting for that. I mostly just mentioned him because I feel like if I didn't mention Char in a video about Gundam, it'd be probably a crime. I can't review who he is in the future though, so my current review for Char is just, he's alright. He's played by the actor who plays Shang, so that's pretty cool. 3 thumbs up. Out of what? I'll never tell. Another thing about Gundam is that it's incredibly intricate with its world building and like lore. And if you're one of those people who is like really into like tanks and machinery and weaponry and guns and all of that stuff, Gundam is filled to the brim with like different models and different types of weapons that do this and do that and have different schematics and little variations and stuff like that. I'm not that type of person personally, but if you're into that, Gundam has just like a ton of it. Because one of the interesting things is that throughout the series of Gundam, Amuro has the titular Gundam, the mobile suit that is labeled Gundam, and Zeon, the enemies, will just continuously pump out mobile suit after mobile suit. By the way, that's the classification of these like giant robots. They're called mobile suits, and they just pump out different variations. Like one's underwater, one has claws, one has like a flail. They just keep pumping them out, and it's really interesting to see that, you know, the Earth Federation has one thing and they stick to it, and that's it's, you know, it's the good thing. But Zeon consistently adapts. Just like a little interesting thing I saw in the series. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is the fact that Amuro kind of struggles to cope with the war. Before he launches, we can see him trembling in his cockpit, and you know, he has trouble sleeping. He gets into fights. He, you know, yells at people.
アムロがダメなんです。戦いたくないって。
なんだと？
ブライト。
アムロ、いいか、出撃なんだぞ。
戦いが終わったらぐっすり眠れるっていう保証があるんですか？
保証？
アムロ。
アムロにも出撃させろ。
アムロ、出撃だ。アムロ、行くぞ。発進だ。アムロ、発進するぞ。みんな。
And one of the earliest ways he gets over this is through love. So there's a character named Matilda, and she's a female officer that a lot of the younger male officers are smitten with, including Amuro. And during his time of like, you know, I don't want to fight, I'm struggling, I can't even sleep sometimes, he sees her and he's like, whoa, whoa, hachi machi. And he's like, you know what, maybe I can fight. And that's exactly what he does. He starts fighting and he's like, hey, Matilda, how was that? Wasn't that sick? Didn't I do a great job? And surely this will never happen in a piece of media again. Surely this will never be expanded upon in another series. Of course, I sure hope that no one would ever take this idea and expand on it further. By the way, one thing I have to mention about Matilda is her hairline. You know, I shouldn't even be speaking about this, but man, she really gives Vegeta a run for his money. But eventually Matilda does in fact die, and Amuro has to learn different ways of coping. And so, like I said, Amuro has basically gone through the gamut of trying to cope with the war. He's cried, he's ran away, he's become numb, he's tried to empathize, and none of it works. So what is even left for Amuro? And the answer is that he just needed to empathize with the right people. Amuro goes outside to find people to empathize with, his mother, his father, when characters who have been fighting alongside with him in war have been right there. Characters like Fra Bo, Hayato, Job John, etc., etc. The main character he sticks with is Fra Bo, which makes sense. You know, that's his childhood friend. She's been with him his entire life. And, you know, they both have been struggling with this war. And one of my favorite moments in this show is where Amuro goes to Fra and he tells her, listen, we have to talk. And I don't know the words right now to express how I'm feeling, but when I do, I'm gonna tell you about it. And she says, okay.
そうかい？別にいつか話せるようになったら話すよ。いろんなことがあったんだ。
And I really like this conversation because what it shows us is that Amuro has emotionally matured. He's not saying like, hey, can we talk? He knows that Fra Bo is here for him. And he also knows that he doesn't have the right words to tell her right now. And so he's like, hey, I want to have this conversation later because I don't know the right words for it. And to me, it's so emotionally mature. And I really like that for Amuro. The point of this show is not to watch a young boy fall and crumble into becoming nothing. The point is that it goes down so it eventually can come up. Because I'll be honest with you, if Amuro hadn't figured out a way to cope, If Frabo was not there, he'd either be dead or he would have killed himself. Just straight up. The point of Gundam is to show the veracity of human spirit even in the most horrendous circumstances. Even in the face of horrific war, Amuro Ray finds solace in his loved ones, and they become his strength. Gundam could have been about the slow decline and degradation of Amuro until he becomes nothing, just a husk of a man. But it's not. It's optimistic. And that's, I think, the appeal of Gundam. It's a story about war, but it's not nihilistic. It's optimistic. And ultimately, that's what characterizes Gundam. And I think the point of Gundam is empathy. To empathize with Amuro. The story of Amuro Ray is the story of a young boy who's able to smile and laugh and enjoy his life in spite of the terrible, terrible circumstances that he's been put in. Amuro Ray is the embodiment of the human spirit. I'll be honest with you, I don't know where Gundam is going from here. This actually genuinely seems like kind of the perfect ending, but you and I both know that this is not where Gundam ends. And I'm kind of scared to see where it goes because I like the progress that Amuro has made. I like the person that he's become and that everybody else has become. They're all good people at their heart of hearts. Even the bad guys are good people. All that I really know is that there's a lot left to be watched, and I'm gonna be there to watch it. Honestly, if I had my choice, I would say I would want for the war to be over and Amuro to, like, I don't know, live on a farm or something with all of his friends and family and everybody be happy and great. But you and I both know that that's not what's gonna happen, and that's probably not what does happen. When I do get to Zeta, which is the sequel to Mobile Suit Gundam the original, I'm probably gonna make a video about it, and I hope you're there too. Whatever life has in store for Amuro, I'm probably gonna be there just to see what happens. For better or for worse, that's the human experience, and I just want to see what happens to Amuro. Gundam is a show that caters to a lot of people. Military lovers, political intrigue lovers, history nerds, people who love deep world building and lore. Mobile Suit Gundam, despite its age, has honestly become one of my favorite anime of all time, and is genuinely a fantastic watch. I highly recommend this show, and I'm excited for the future. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you thought. Let me know what you think about Gundam. Maybe I'm wrong about some things, or maybe you have different feelings about how some things played out. Maybe you watched the movie and you think it's a better watch. Just let me know. I'll see you all in the follow-up video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.